This episode is made possible by the generosity of our listeners. Thank you.
Welcome to the Creation Science
for Kids
show. We've talked about Earth, the planets, the sun, and stars already. Today, it's time to look at comets. We'll think about how David knew the heavens talk, even though we can't hear anything. And finish up with a review of an exciting book about dinosaurs put together by creationists. Praise the Lord. I will give thanks to the Lord with my whole heart, in the company of the upright, in the congregation. Great are the works of the Lord, studied by all who delight in them. Full of splendor and majesty is his work, and his righteousness endures forever. He has caused his wondrous works to be remembered. The Lord is gracious and merciful. Psalm 111, verses 1 through 4. This is episode 52 of the podcast where we learn about Jesus, our Creator, and his amazing world. Hi, I'm Sherry Fields, your host, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Joseph.
Hello.
And Samuel.
Hi.
To follow along with what we're looking at, check out the show notes, creationscience4kids.com/comets. All right, today I picked a passage out of Psalms. Psalm 19 is very famous for talking about the created world, and it ends up speaking about the Bible. But we're going to read the first part, and I chose an interesting version. It's called the easy-to-read version. Would you please read it for us, Joseph?
The heavens tell about the glory of God. The skies announce what his hands have made. Each new day tells more of the story, and each night reveals more and more about God's power. You cannot hear them say anything. They don't make any sound we can hear. But their message goes throughout the world. Their teaching reaches the ends of the earth.
Thank you, Joseph. Yeah, that was a little different reading, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It's quite different from the King James that we are used to, and that sounds so beautiful and poetic. Did you notice what was completely opposite from what the King James said? In verse 3, here's what the King James says. There is no speech nor language where their voice is not heard. That's the opposite from what you said, isn't it?
Yeah.
What's going on? I had noticed this a long time ago when I realized that if I tried to look up in the Strong's Concordance any word that was in italics in the King James, it would say, nope, there's no word there. That's one of the nicest things about the King James. If the translators added words so that it would make sense in English, it's written in slightly slanted letters like you see here. See those?
Yeah.
The there is in slanted, and the where is also slanted. So let's see what it sounds like if you read the King James, taking those words out.
It says, no speech nor language, their voice is not heard.
That sounds like what you read in the easy to read, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Now, the translators in the time of King James thought, that sounds really weird. Maybe this is what it means, that there's no speech nor language where their voice is not heard. And there are other translators that agree with them. However, I rather like there is no speech nor language, you can't hear their voices. Because, do we hear the sound of stars?
No.
No. You can receive the pulses they send out, like quasars. They send out a lot of radiation, and they can put it back together into sounds that we can hear. But that's done by computers reading impulses rather than actual sound waves going all the way through space. So David was perfectly right that you can't hear the sound they make, and yet we still receive their message. Even though you don't hear anything, their message goes throughout the world. And what are they teaching us?
More and more about God's power.
Right. And they also announce what about themselves? The skies announce
what his hands have made.
So when you look up at the skies at night, what can you be sure of?
That there are stars.
And the stars tell us what about God?
His power.
And?
His hands have made.
Made what?
Stars.
Stars. Yes. Now, we're actually going to be next looking at something else that God made up in the heavens besides the stars. Comets. What I want to talk about for comets is from the Creation Research Society's quarterly journal. Back in the spring, I joined them so that I could save money going to their conference where I got to meet Dr. Lyle. And one of the things that I get because I joined them is their magazine, or rather peer-reviewed journal. And before we start on the article, one of the things I should point out is that people who want to deny that God is a creator often throw at us that creation scientists, which they don't even believe are scientists, never get into peer-reviewed journals. Now, I looked at the back of this, and it has instructions for scientists who want to submit papers to this, and it points out that 2 or more technical referees will be reading their manuscript, plus an editor who is on the staff at Creation Research Society. So you have a minimum of 3 people looking it over, and they said usually there will be some revisions that they'll want you to make to your paper before they publish it. So that is what is called peer review, where others who know about the topic you're writing about say, this doesn't really make sense. So that only things that do make sense to people who know about the subject gets through to be published. So when the secular people tell us that there are no peer-reviewed journals, that's because they don't want to admit that this is a real magazine or a real journal, which it is. It's very scientific, and there are many real scientists who submit to it and hundreds of them who read it. Okay, so this article that I want to look at was written by John Hartnett, and it's kind of nice. He has a blog, and you can interact with him online. If I remember right, he's from Australia. I'll have to look at that and put in the show notes if he's not, but I'm pretty sure he's from Australia. And he wrote on comets, the Kuiper belt, and the Oort cloud. Now, a lot of this is pretty technical, but there were enough fascinating things in here that I thought it'd be perfect for sharing with you guys on the podcast. He's talking about comets. What are comets? Samuel, do you know?
No.
Joseph?
I know they have like exhaust stuff, but
yeah, that's called their tail. And what's cool is the tail always faces away from the sun. So when they're heading towards the sun, the tail's behind them. But when they're heading away from the sun, the tail is in front of them, which is kind of odd because it's the sun's radiation that's forcing the material away and making them glow, which is why we can see them. Do you know anything else about comets?
they're fiery rocks that shoot around the world.
Yeah, they're not exactly fiery. They glow again because of the sun's radiation that turns into northern lights when it gets near planet Earth, hits them directly because they don't have a magnetic shield protecting them. Okay, so a comet is a ball of, let's see, here we go. They are balls of ice and dust, or icy dirt balls. So dust is very fine. Dirt is bigger particles of rock kind of stuff mixed with ice. One of the problems for people who want the universe to have made itself is, how do you get Earth to have so much water on it? And one of the ideas is that the water collected from comets hitting Earth, and they have so much water in them. Of course, where did the comets get the water from? But that's what comets are made out of. So part of that tail is the water that sublimates. Okay, I forgot to look up which episode we talked about that. It was right near the beginning when the Holy Spirit was hovering over the surface of the water. And I talked to you guys about what happens to water if you take it out into outer space, liquid water. Do you remember?
It just floats. It's like Jell-O.
No, it does not. It flashes. Do you remember when it was a super cold day and your dad took boiling water and threw it outside? What happened?
It evaporated.
Yeah, it turned instantly to steam. That's what happens to the comets. When the radiation coming off of the sun hits that ice and it gets hot enough, it just flashes. And that's what you're seeing in the tail. Okay, there are two categories of comets. They all go around the world, or around the sun, in a circle or ellipse, which is like an egg shape. It can be pretty skinny, but they all orbit the sun. Ones that take less than 200 years are called short period comets, and then ones that take more than 200 years are called long period comets. One of the most famous, and unfortunately all you kids are too young to remember it, I was just a little girl myself, is Halley's Comet. When you guys get to be quite grown up, nearly ready to be grandparents, it's going to come around again because it comes around every, oh dear, I'm going to forget the exact year, every 70 years or so. So I will be an old lady when it comes back. But we know it comes around every 70 years, and It's been doing that for hundreds and hundreds of years. So that's one of the most famous short period comets. And then there are ones, Hale-Bopp came, I think it was 93 or 94. And it was very, very bright. And both Mr. Hale and Mr. Bopp saw it coming and told the scientific community about it. So they both got their name on the comet. And it was so bright when I first saw it. You know what I thought it was?
No.
I thought it was a helicopter. We were driving on the freeway and I was looking out my window and I saw this thing and I thought it was a helicopter that was just staying right near us for a long, long time. It was very odd. Sometimes now I'll see a contrail glowing at about sunset and it looks very similar to the way Hale-Bopp looked. So those are the two kinds of comets. Now, the question is, where do they come from? Because here's the problem. Every time the comet comes near the sun and it makes that tail, what is happening to it?
It's dying.
How is it dying?
Because it's going to the sun and it's going to be evaporated.
So it doesn't necessarily go into the sun, although we'll talk about that in a little bit, but it's evaporating. Yeah. So it's losing material. They start out pretty big, many, many tons of material, but every time they come around, like Halley, at its peak loss rate, when it gets closest to the sun, loses about 54 tons a second of gas. That's a lot of material. So it could survive only 95 trips around the sun before there would be nothing left. But it's still there. So we know Halley's comet isn't very old. So here's what he says. If you have a comet that goes around the sun right at 200-year cycle, that would be only about 30 times since God actually created the universe. And it would have only lost about 30% of its mass, the matter that it was made up of. It would still have 65 more passages before it would be all gone. But for the uniformitarians, do they believe the Earth is only about 6,000 years old? No, they believe it's...
Millions and billions. And
how many? No. They believe the Earth is about 4.6 billion years old, that's when the planets were forming. They use that based on radiometric dating of asteroids. To get billions of years, it would have had to pass at least 25 million times to be as old as the solar system. And there's no way it could have lasted that long, is there?
Nope.
If it would run out in only another 65 and they need 25 million, there's no way that'll work. Even the long period comets could only survive for about 95 million years, which is a tiny fraction of 1 billion, and they need 4 billion. So none of the comets that we have ever observed fit with the billions of years old solar system. All right, now I wanted to show you, we have a new instrument on board, something called the SOHO, that's been watching comets since 2000, the year 2000. Look at this picture. It shows they blotted out the sun with a dark circle so we can just see all the stuff coming out from the sun. What's it look like?
It looks like rays.
Rays, yeah, coming out in pretty nearly a circle. And what's this, Samuel?
A comet
And where's it going?
around the sun.
Is it going around? Is it going to make it?
No.
No, if it keeps going the direction it's heading, it's going to...
Head into the sun and explode.
Yeah, plunge right into the sun is what Dr. Hartnett said. Yes, so we have found 3,000 comets that are getting so close to the sun that not one of them has survived. Just in the last 16 years, because this is using material from up to early 2016. That's a lot of comets. Isn't that cool? So you wonder how many had been falling into the sun that we hadn't been able to see without that SOHO spacecraft that NASA launched. All right, then there's an interesting group of comets. I'm going to show you this graph. When I first looked at it, it looks like a math graph because it is sort of. And it took me a bit to figure out what is going on. But you have here, inclination is if the comets are going around the sun like we do. Take the planets and the sun at the center, it forms a disk, a lot like a CD, where they're very nearly in a flat line plane, and that's called zero inclination, that they're going around the sun at the same level. So if they were in the exact same spot and going slower, we would eventually hit them kind of thing. They're in a flat, two-dimensional plane. But then inclination is being tipped more and more so that it could be going up and down around the sun instead of what we see as going forward on the flat.
Going around the sun.
Yeah, what do you see here in this part where it's very near the sun? That's what this means off to the left of the chart. And not at all in the same disk that we are. It's almost straight up and down. What color is this?
Blue.
Blue. And there's a whole bunch of comets that are all clustered, going very nearly up and down while we're going left and right. It's called the Comets group, and their best guess is that there was a giant comet that broke apart and made a whole bunch. And then there's this red group that's very far away from the sun. They are called the Jupiter family, and it's very nearly on the same plane as the planets. But look at all these gray dots. What does that tell you?
There are other comets.
And it goes all the way up and all the way down. Do you know what that means? Okay, going up and down means some of them are at a slight angle to Earth's orbit, some of them are at a high angle. That's why I showed you that video on how the electrons go around the nucleus of the atom. Remember, what shape does it make when the electrons are spinning super fast around the atom?
A circle.
Yeah, it makes like a sphere going all the way around, and that's the way it is with comets. If you'd have to have teeny tiny dots, because comets are very, very small compared to how far out they are. But they make a sphere that there is no one point that doesn't have a comet that we already know about, and we're constantly finding out about new ones. So that was kind of cool, because I had known about the comets that were going around in the same plane as the planets. I didn't realize that there were ones going up and down and at all different points around the sun. So that was really fun to find out about. Okay, then what do the people who want the universe to have made itself do to explain how comets are still around if they were right that the solar system is 4.6 billion years old? A guy named Jan Oort, who was born in 1900, came up with an idea that is now known as the Oort cloud. He said, way, way far out there, way too far for us to see, far beyond Pluto, is a place where there's lots and lots of objects. Now, they're small, so there's still lots of room, which is why we can see the stars, according to him. But every once in a while, something will knock one of those out of its position, and it'll start plunging in towards the Earth, or towards the sun, and swing around and become a new comet. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. Is there any way we can tell if he's right or not?
No.
No, there's not. So it is a story. It's a story that if you want to believe it, you certainly can, but it is not a scientifically observed fact. It is just a guess for people who want and need to keep their ideas, the universe to be very, very old. Now, one of the other things that he talked about is out beyond Neptune, which is the last proper planet. You've got Pluto beyond it, but it's now been classified as, what kind of a planet is it?
Dwarf planet.
Dwarf planet. I always forget. I always want to call Pluto a proper planet. There's something called centaurs. Have you ever heard of a centaur in astronomy? No. So what are centaurs in Greek myth?
They are these half human, half horse creatures.
But in astronomy, a centaur is a fairly large icy body that orbits the sun, but are not classed as comets. Although some say they may become short-period comets if they are knocked out of their current orbits. So right now, they're going around the sun and never getting close enough to start having the comet tail and interact with the sun the way a comet does. But those are centaurs. Now, one of the interesting things he was talking about is, see this picture? This picture is based on what we know. What's that dot right in the middle?
The sun.
The sun. Here's Pluto's orbit going around like that. And Pluto, remember, that is way super far out compared to us. And there's all this mass. Now, actually, each dot is very, very small. But it makes, what's the shape that it's making here?
Like a CD.
Like a CD. That's known as a Kuiper belt. And That's where they think the long period comets might come from. And we have been finding more and more objects out there as we've been getting better and better instruments. So the Kuiper belt has been observed and could explain how we can have the short period comets and things. But the Oort cloud that they draw here, see that? And the sun is supposed to be right there, wee tiny in the middle.
Yeah.
That is, yeah, they have the idea that some of this is almost halfway out to the nearest star, but none of it has been observed. Cool is these things look very much like how the electrons go around the atom, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's fascinating that when you look tiny and when you look enormous, you get very similar shapes. So I thought that was super cool. And then there was one last thing, because he gets into some pretty technical stuff. Here are, and of course these dots are way too big, but you've got the comets that we know are mostly in close. Here's the orbit of Saturn and Jupiter, and the sun is right at the middle, of course. And then you've got we haven't found very many objects between Uranus and Neptune. It's almost empty there. And then you get a whole bunch of objects that we've found out beyond Neptune. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
I don't know why, but it sure is cool. So those are comets. And although they want very much for comets to help explain how the universe could be old, it makes a lot more sense looking at it God's way. Now, there are some scientists, I know one, Dr. Walt Brown, thinks that the comets and all these objects out here were spewed out from the Earth because, again, these dots are actually far, far smaller than they show. When the flood happened, he thinks this stuff got sprayed out. Because remember, comets are made out of dust and ice. Me, I don't have enough information to know whether he's right. And the more and more stuff we find out there, the more that seems kind of odd. So I don't know. We've got lots of scientific ideas and people looking at it from different ways. But however, and whenever God made them, he did make cool comets. And hopefully here soon we'll get to see some. And then you'll know what they are without me having to say, well, I remember long, long ago when I was young. And you can tell your kids about it. Won't that be fun?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I actually found a joke for the day. You ready, Samuel? What do planets like to read?
Comet.
Yeah, you're right. It's about comet, but...
Comet books.
Comet books.
I get it.
Okay, Joseph, what report do you have for us today?
I'm going to tell you about the Institute for Creation Research's book called Guide to Dinosaurs.
Sounds great.
The book is really cool to read if you haven't read it before or read about dinosaurs at all, but you kind of know what dinosaurs are, like you watch something with dinosaurs and you want to find out more about them. Then
What's it look like?
It has lots of pictures of dinosaurs.
Right. It's a hardbound large book, and every single page has bunches of pictures. Okay, what kinds of things can you learn in it?
You can learn about the beginnings of like the history and
Of what?
The history of dinosaurs and what both evolution and creationists believe.
And what's this with the pictures of these very old guys?
And the name of the dinosaurs, called Dinosauria, was found by Sir Richard Owen in 1841.
Okay, so that tells us, when did we start studying dinosaurs as we know them today?
In 1841.
Well, before that, what were they finding? Were they finding animals in their backyard?
No, they were finding bones. Like,
What kind of bones?
they were finding these large bones.
Are they regular bones like dogs chew on?
No.
Fossils.
Fossils.
Bones that?
Bones that have been fossilized.
Which means, what happened to them if they've been fossilized?
They got squished really hard and they got buried.
Buried and?
Preserved.
How?
Blood.
What's the difference between a fossil and a regular bone?
Fossil is on the rock, and the bones are...
Not just on the rock. It's
They
actually
are the
been...
rock.
That's why we're so surprised, and especially the people who want them to be millions of years old, when some of it didn't get turned to rock. Most of it is mineral.
Yeah.
It's not a biological material anymore. So it was buried in such a way that the organic material that used to be the animal got replaced by, it's called permineralized, by minerals that were in the water and the sediment around them. So yeah, it tells about the history of us discovering these bones that got turned to rock. And then it talks about
the dinosaurs in the Bible, like the behemoth in Job and the other one, the Leviathan.
Mm-hmm. Now, does it mention? Oh, yes. Why don't we read about dinosaur when we read the Bible?
Because the word dinosaur wasn't found until
Because when was the King James translated into English?
I don't actually know.
1611.
1611.
So just after the year 1600. And when did Mr. Owen name them dinosaurs?
1841.
Right. So that was how many years later?
230 years later.
Yeah. So for 230 years, we only had the word. Do you know what we called the ones that we had known from them being alive still?
No.
Dragons.
Dragons, right.
Yes. So now Behemoth is not when you have stories about St. George fighting the dragon. It was usually the meat eater type that they would picture. Okay, so then it has stuff about the pre-flood climate and
the dinosaurs on the ark.
Yeah, what did you learn there?
About the size of the ark mostly, and about how they feed.
Right. So what about the behemoth or the sauropod dinosaur getting on the ark? What did it say about those great big guys? That big sauropod that we found would have his head nearly up to the top of the ark, even though we know how enormous it really was. So how did it fit on the ark?
Oh, the babies.
Yes, that big one didn't. That's why we found its bones fossilized, because obviously it got buried by the flood.
They have the dinosaurs, about the baby dinosaurs, they're smaller than an average-sized sheep.
Right, they're quite a bit smaller. That one's just bigger than its leg, this Compsognathus. Okay, and what about what it ate? Did you read about that? Okay, so in order to fulfill God's command to multiply and fill the earth, even animals that had become meat eaters probably ate vegetarian diets during and for a time directly after the flood. And that's one of the things we've learned from like Mount St. Helens. It wiped out all the vegetation, but there were still seeds down below, and the green plants grew up very quickly, much more quickly than they were expecting. So right after the flood, you had rich, fertile soil, and God took care of the seeds, made sure enough of them floated to quickly cover the land with plenty of tender green shoots and plants for them to eat. Okay, so what's this?
About the flood, that they found dinosaur prints going up the mountains and stuff.
Yeah, we've found a lot, and even some of it, I think, this is a pretty new book. If I recall, it's 2 years old? Yeah, this was first printed in October 2014. Even since then, we've found where it's obvious that the mud tracks or their footprints left behind, these very large animals were half floating, that they were definitely swimming and hitting the bottom. So it was not normal walking prints like you would have if they were slowly lumbering through a muddy spot. Yeah, we have found lots of tracks of dinosaurs heading one direction, uphill, and definitely interacting with the water. Yeah. So that's pretty cool. Okay.
They have dinosaurs in the Ice Age.
And then what's this statue of?
St. George and the Dragon.
Right. And there are lots and lots of stories. People knew dragons all around the world. So, yeah, what's this? Do you remember where this is?
No.
It's in Cambodia, and it was carved about how long ago?
Back to the 1100s.
Right, in the 1100s. So that was about how long ago?
Oh, 1,000.
Yeah, almost 900 years ago. And what is that a carving of?
A stegosaurus.
Right. Had they dug up the bones and put together a fossil skeleton?
No.
And
it also has Chinese zodiac, which is their count, which is basically the years.
And a cycle of years.
And one of them is a dragon.
Right. And what do they point out? All the rest of these animals are
still around today.
Right. We know them quite well. And then right in the middle, it has the dragon. So, like this carving of the Stegosaurus, how would they have done such a good job depicting it when it's taken us a long time to figure out how to reconstruct from just the bones?
That the dinosaurs were still around
Right.
when they were alive.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so then it talks about why we don't see dinosaurs at the zoo.
And this about dinosaurs.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly about that dinosaurs evolved into birds, like with the Archaeopteryx that has teeth.
Wow. So it has a huge amount on their history and a dig, what it's like. Would it be a lot of fun going on a dinosaur dig?
No.
Why not?
Because it's hot.
Mm-hmm. And
you might not find anything.
Right.
At all.
And it's often dusty and dirty and you're out in the middle of nowhere. Yeah. Okay. Ooh, this is a cool picture. What is this showing?
It's a dinosaur with a fish.
Mm-hmm. Buried obviously at the same time and the same level. It's a Sinosauropteryx, a small land-dwelling dinosaur, right next to a fish. One of the things that I've heard when they have to admit that there are fish or even sharks, they'll say these were freshwater sharks because they were buried with the dinosaurs, so therefore they had to be freshwater. But why do they believe that? Because they don't admit that the flood happened and everything got jumbled. All right. Finding ages. Wow. They've got a whole bunch. Ooh. Dinosaur vegetation.
I didn't see that page at all.
Okay. Yeah. One of the things that they often do is they'll say, if you see pictures of dinosaurs in a regular book, what do they usually have in the background all around them?
Trees.
What kind of trees? Oak trees?
No, really just large trees.
Yeah, they're special trees, a lot of them that have gone extinct. Now, this is pointing out that these kinds of trees that they show, like actually oak and sassafras, palm trees and roses and rice, are known from the fossil record just like the dinosaurs. But there also were quite a few plants that we don't have anymore. They got lost. Like I like to think that gopher wood might have been one of those trees that it's only used there in the Bible. It doesn't appear later. So King David would have never seen gopher wood, and none of us might have seen it. We don't know. Okay, animals mixed with dinosaurs. And then did dinosaurs evolve into birds? I kind of wish they had more on this because that's been one of the big pushes that they're getting more and more noisy about, and even adding in at museum displays more about dinosaurs turning into birds. So half the book is all about their history. And again, was it hard to read all this?
No, not really.
Why not?
Because most of it is very short about it, but it has a bunch of detail.
Yeah. So it's not exactly where you've got the main text, although it has some to open it and then sidebars, but it is all nicely broken up. Most of the things are in single paragraphs, and then you can move on to a slightly different subject. So yeah, it keeps your interest pretty well.
And then it has the dinosaur.
Yeah. So now, Joseph, tell me about your favorite dinosaurs that you read about.
The Velociraptor.
Yeah, what did you learn about them?
That the movie Jurassic World that they made actually used the wrong dinosaur and named it the Velociraptor.
Okay.
Because this is
what's it? How do you pronounce it?
Deinonychus. They took that dinosaur and called it Velociraptor.
Right.
But a Velociraptor is about the size of a large turkey.
Yeah, so the Deinonychus is much more scary and intimidating. Yeah, and they do look pretty similar. What are some others?
Then there's the Psittacosaurus, which is called the parrot reptile.
Because?
It has a beak like a parrot.
Right. But what's cool about it besides it's got a cool mouth? What else? It has,
like, at the very beginning of the tail, it has these frills.
Yeah. Going up pretty high.
But I didn't see anything about it. So it had an extra beak-like bone at the front of the jaw called a rostral. Although it doesn't have any front teeth like we have, so it has cheek teeth for slicing the meat and vegetable.
Not meat.
Vegetables.
Yeah, vegetation. Okay, on our teeth, we have our slicing teeth up front for biting into an apple and breaking off bits. And then our side teeth, the ones in our cheeks, do what? Grind. So instead, they don't have grinding teeth. Instead, they had their slicing teeth on the side. Yeah, you wonder if they ever bit their cheeks. That would hurt because it's hard enough when you bite with the grinders. Okay, and what are these rocks here?
They're
Yeah, what's it mean? Gastroliths.
I don't know.
What's it also called?
Oh, they're stomach stones.
Yeah?
To grind their food.
Okay, so what do we have today that's alive that uses stomach stones, gastroliths?
Cows?
No, they have regular grinding teeth. Birds do. Birds have just their beak. They don't have any teeth, the living ones. And so they'll swallow stones, and that's what they use their gizzard for. It's a special muscle that has the rocks in there, and that actually squeezes and grinds and actually works like a millstone to grind up the grain. So these, how was it again? Psittacosauruses, they must have had a gizzard or something to grind their food after they had swallowed it with rocks. Isn't that weird?
Yeah. And now, the other dinosaur I really like is called the Triceratops.
Uh-huh. That one's pretty well known. So what's cool about it?
It has 3 horns.
Right, which is why it's called... There's a whole Ceratops family. There's Protoceratops.
There's a Toroceratops with only 1 horn.
Okay, yeah, like a unicorn with a shield. Yeah, and then there's the one that doesn't have any horns, the Protoceratops. But the Triceratops is the most famous with 3. Mm-hmm. What's cool about it?
It can take on a
Tyrannosaurus. Yeah, T-Rex.
In 2013, they found a Tyrannosaurus teeth. They were lodged in the Triceratops skull.
Ouch.
So that means they were fighting.
Yeah, most definitely. And then both of them had rather a shock. They got buried. Okay, so do you think this is a nice book for families to have?
Yes.
Yeah, why?
So that they can go over it together and show them how the evolution is not true. Mm-hmm. And how big the dinosaurs actually are.
Yeah, now, one of the things, I once read a creation book that I did not review because I found it rather whiny, saying, oh, they always say it's like this, but really it's like that. Is this book whiny like that?
No. They say, hey, this is what we've researched, and this is how we find it to be true.
Yeah, I am very impressed with it and think it would be very good, especially if you've got a child who's really into dinosaurs. It's got enough pictures that you can have it for a little one once they can handle pages without ripping them, and enough information to be interesting, well, really up into adulthood. And it uses big words, but then it describes them so you can figure out what things like gastroliths are, doesn't it?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Joseph.
Don't forget, you can find links to all the things we talked about today by visiting the show notes page, creationscience4kids.com/comets or /052 for episode 52.
I'd like to say thank you to Judy Tupp for kindly leaving us a 5-star review in iTunes. She says, great discussion starter. I listen to this podcast with my 13-year-old, and we both find it interesting. My favorite episodes are the interviews. Seeing your review helped brighten my day. I like the interviews a lot, too, and look forward to when we can do them more often. But as you heard in our recent one at the Answers in Genesis Design Studio, there are some sound quality issues at my house for the time being. In the meantime, if you would like to hear more from Creation Scientists, I list a couple of good podcasts, including ones from both Answers in Genesis and the Institute for Creation Research on my page of Creation Podcasts. That's creationscience4kids.com/creation-podcasts, or you'll find a link to it near the top of my podcast page.
If you want to encourage us too, leaving the show a rating on iTunes is a great way to do that and help families looking for a new podcast to find us.
Remember, I've published an ebook for kids explaining why people think the Earth is billions of years old and what you have to believe to think evolution can happen. It's only 35 pages long, but packed with info to help you understand the young Earth viewpoint. Mysteries of Space and Time is available for free on every e-reader platform. Visit my ebook page for the links.
Do you like science? Got a subject you want to learn about? Or maybe you like telling stories?
Remember, it's super easy to turn your smartphone into a recorder, and if you send me a report, story, joke, or interesting idea, I might use it in a future show. Head over to creationscience4kids.com/podcast to find out what to do.
Well, this finishes up our show for today. Until next time, have fun treasuring our amazing universe and creator.
Thou art worthy, O Lord, to receive glory and honor and power, for thou hast created all things, and for thy pleasure they are and were created. Revelation 4:11.